So my name is Govan Whittles, the host of the IMM Institute's Friday Flash Talk.
This is the platform where we hope to bring you insightful views on the latest marketing trends.
Brands are really applying it to their strategy.
Convenience and being closer to your customer.
Guests who are engaged in helping move the industry forward. Hello and welcome everyone to another installment of the IMM Institute's Friday Flash Talk. It's a pleasure to be back with you again to discuss some of the leading trends in the world of marketing and supply chain. Today we're kicking off a new direction. It's something that I'm really excited to talk about. It's the world of supply chain and marketing and how they connect. Remember that this is your Friday Flash Talk. We love the interactions that we're getting on social media, and we're encouraging all of you to keep on commenting and share the posts. You can catch us on LinkedIn, on Twitter, on Facebook. So do leave your remarks and keep the conversation going. As usual, we have the pleasure of introducing some of the leading voices in the world of supply chain and marketing, and today is no different. My name is Govan Whittles. I'm your host, and today we'll be talking about supply chain and marketing together. The talk is called From Silos to Synergy, Breaking Down Barriers to Fuse Marketing and Supply Chain Functions. And it's my pleasure to have with us today on the Friday Flash Talk, Thobekile Nxumalo. Thobekile Nxumalo is an accomplished supply chain professional with over a decade of experience leading and delivering high-impact projects, primarily within the third-party logistics sector and select industries across the supply chain landscape. Currently driving key initiatives at a management consulting firm, she combines a relentless pursuit of excellence with practical hands-on expertise gained through roles in solution development and regional logistics. Her work spans both the private and public sectors, with a strong focus on delivering end-to-end logistics solutions, improving warehouse practices, leading supply chain transformation projects, and embedding continuous improvement in operational excellence. With a passion for strategy development and execution, Thobekile is widely recognized as a trusted advisor and distinguished leader who consistently delivers measurable value and fosters strong collaborative relationships. Thobekile, welcome to the Flash Talk. That's a hell of an introduction, and I'm sure that today's talk will live up to it. And it's also my pleasure to introduce Marzia Storpioli. Marzia has more than 20 years of professional experience and has held several executive management positions at blue-chip multinational organizations in manufacturing, that's pharma, confectionery, and cosmetics, and services, consulting, and financial services. Her areas of expertise include supply chain management, procurement, demand supply planning, and human resource management, having worked in global organizations such as Estee Lauder, I know I'm mispronouncing that, Cadbury, Kraft Foods, and Merck Inc. Both locally and internationally, Marzia has successfully managed multi-million rand projects, worked in global sourcing, category management, and corporate governance, and also implemented global best practices in SCM. And Marzia joins us today as an IMM Graduate School specialist. She'll help us shepherd the conversation along. And Marzia, it's great to have you here with us as well.
Thank you.
As for me, I'm still Govan Whittles, the host of the IMM Friday Flash Talk. And as usual, we're looking forward to bringing you insights and trying to have a challenging conversation today. And I think that's important because I know there's a bit of tension between supply chain and marketing. We'll get into that. But first, Thobekile, the floor is yours. Tell us what you think about moving the relationship between supply chain and marketing from silos to synergy.
Thank you so much, Govan. I really appreciate the warm welcome. It is very exciting to be part of this conversation. I'm really looking forward to it. I think the topic itself, as you've already highlighted, is quite fascinating. I think the intersection between marketing and supply chain is a very powerful combination, and one that I think we should definitely not take for granted. If you think about it, marketing sparks the desire, it creates the demand. And then you've got supply chain, which I refer to as the engine room, that then delivers on that promise, right? So, when those two functions are aligned, game-changing things occur. And I don't say this lightly. And I believe, there's really so much to unpack here. So I think we're definitely going to have quite an insightful conversation if we just look at the partnership. So, to answer your question, I think it's important for us to just first think about the context that surrounds the disconnect that often exists between the two functions, right? And I want to call it like the elephant in the boardroom, or the corporate Cold War. And to paint the scenario, you often find marketing that is out there crafting brilliant campaigns, building the hype, promising flash sales, collaborating with influencers, you name it. Then you've got supply chain sitting in a room, hyperventilating, trying to figure out where exactly or where are we going to plan this magical new product. So, what I want to highlight here is that we often hear the term breaking down silos. So I think it's important for us to just understand that first, because it all becomes white noise. But what does that actually mean when you apply it to the world of marketing and supply chain? And I think at its core, it means you're striving to create this seamless orchestration across, your interconnected functions that you normally find in an organization's value chain. And yes, that's just really just a sophisticated way of saying getting teams to work together, right? And not just sit in meetings while silently sticking to their own agendas, okay? But there's communication, there's transparency, there's visibility between the teams. There's a coordinated effort in terms of making things happen. But here's what happens instead, right? You have marketing and supply chain that often work in parallel lanes. And what I mean by that is, the teams are maybe chasing their own KPIs, they making decisions driven by different data sets, the timelines are different, the tools are different. And even the departments themselves, they tend to speak different dialects of corporate jargon. I can be talking about, yes, the planning and the sourcing, and, marketing and sales is talking, revenue and sales, right? And then you find that there's barely an understanding of each other's functions. But when these functions actually start collaborating and coexist, I believe that's when the magic kicks in. And just to kind of expand a bit on that and just paint that picture, let's think of, if we think of Dis-Chem, and it's gearing up for this big fancy spring fragrance campaign, which I absolutely love. It always happens on the 1st of September. But anyway, marketing knows that during this season, maybe there's going to be a spark, or a spike in demand rather. And already they're, preparing those bold, attention-grabbing promos. But if supply chain is not looped in early enough, right, shelves can be half stocked just as customers start flooding in. So then that becomes a missed opportunity. It's a missed sale, right? Purely because of that lack of communication and just that joint planning before the promotion obviously then takes place. But if you flip that scenario, right, and you then consider if marketing and supply chain are in sync. Stock levels maybe are proactively adjusted, warehousing capacities planned accordingly ahead of time, and even store deliveries are then ramped up to meet the expected surge in demand. That way, you're not only just generating interest, but you've started kind of converting revenue. And for me, that starts to speak to the synergy that can actually start to take place. I mean, another example is when we think about just seasonal wellness campaigns. And I can't help but laugh and applaud. I don't know if you guys have seen this, the Switch energy drink ad with the line for cough. And I mean, we all know what they're playing on there, right? With that word. It's absolutely brilliant. But you've got this drink, which is now infused with vitamin C and zinc, which could be right in time for the flu season. But then again, it only hits if marketing and supply chain are in sync. Otherwise, we're just running brilliant campaigns with catchy ads, but then you've got empty shelves, right? So great awareness, but zero conversion, right? This thinking can also be maybe applied when we think about the retail fashion world, where you take a Foschini or the well-known Superbalist, where you'll have maybe your marketing team sees that, look, the current trend or the intel that we're getting shows that oversized denim jackets are the vibe or the trend, or pastel sneakers. But if supply chain is not looped in early, stock will not be pushed to the right locations and the right sizes just in time. So it no longer becomes a demand-driven fulfillment. It just purely becomes a guessing game, right? And I mean, don't get me started on also the take a lot blue dot sale, which I guess is the Super Bowl equivalent in South Africa, right? Where you have all these promotions, promising massive discounts, lightning fast delivery. But once again, to drive the point, if your supply chain and marketing are not in sync or perfectly aligned, you get delayed parcels, overwhelmed call centers, and customer complaints, unfortunately, that are lighting up your mailbox as a Christmas tree. So the bottom line here is, functional silos cost real money. It costs real loyalty. It costs real opportunity. So integration isn't just about being efficient. It's about being responsive. It's about being agile and ahead of the curve. And I think those are all key characteristics or factors that need to be taken into account, given just the hyper-paced, competitive business environment that organizations find themselves in.
So many examples jump out at me immediately. But Marzia, what do you think about the urgency of synergizing supply chain and marketing, and some of what Thobekile said?
Govan, I couldn't agree more. In fact, Thobekile, it's lovely to see you, to meet you, to e-meet you.
Likewise.
And you're speaking to the converted. I couldn't agree more with you. We have some glorious global and local examples of where that collaboration and that synchronicity between marketing and the supply chain have resulted in incredible value for the business. And there are also some examples where that didn't happen and you have some rather disastrous business decisions. So much of what Thobekile was saying is the immediate problem. In other words, we've got to get the stuff on the shelf.
Yes.
But the journey actually doesn't necessarily start in South Africa. It may start in China. It may start in Europe. And it's got to come through a port, whether it's Johannesburg Airport or whether it's Durban. So the journey to get that last mile solution requires collaboration between marketing and supply chain right from the design stage. So it's not a quick phone call saying, by the way, we're running this campaign. We don't know how much we're going to sell, but we hope it's really successful. Just make sure you've got enough stock. Because by then, I'm sure you'd agree with me, Thobekile, it's probably too late. Because there's a whole a level of planning and coordination so that the supply chain can meet the promise made 100%. By marketing. Because effectively, that interface between marketing and the supply chain is the P of the four marketing P's, the place P. And if that is missing, effectively, the business has lost the opportunity. So it's never been more important, particularly, and I'm sure you'll agree with me, Thobekile, it's no longer the products that compete with each other. It's the supply chains that compete with each other, simply because consumers have second bests. They're not completely sold on brand. And if one brand is not available, they'll choose another. So the winning order goes to the supply chain that has the service at the place and time that the customer wants it.
Absolutely.
So that can only be achieved by a continuous flow of information from the marketing department to supply chain, and then back again from supply chain to the marketing department to keep everyone informed of progress, of any stumbling blocks. And there are many, many examples globally of disruptions which could not have been predicted. And unless everyone's informed and is able to then move to overcome this particular problem, you actually will not get a successful launch or a promotion or whatever it is. So it's never been more critical for a business to actually ensure that that collaboration is constant and starts on, at the drawing board when marketing first had that idea.
Thobekile, what is the state of synergy between supply chain and marketing in the South African context? Are we working together right now?
Sure. I think we can have varied perspectives around that. I think there's a spectrum to it. And I think it differs across industries. And I think there's a lot of factors that can contribute to what that level of maturity in terms of the synergy looks like in different organizations, right? We're talking the organization's culture in being able to achieve that kind of collaboration. We're talking the ability of leadership to be able to actually sustain that. So I really do think it boils down to how well the organization has been able to actually embed that kind of culture where they understand and see the value of achieving the collaboration that Marzia and I have already kind of just characterized that exists between marketing and supply chain. So it's not a very straightforward, simple answer. I think it definitely varies. It varies in terms of, like I said, the supply chain maturity of the organization, and also just how aligned an organization's business strategy is with its supply chain, right? And how that marketing function in the supply chain is also treated as strategic imperatives in making sure that collaboration takes place. But if I just go back to some of the examples that I highlighted, I think there's definitely quite a number of examples that even we can look at locally, or even just past examples from organizations that we worked for, or just projects that we've been exposed to that kind of demonstrate that synergy. But I think it really does boil down in terms of just the culture of the organization, the ability of leadership to drive that collaboration between the two, functions. And I guess there's just quite a number of best practices relative, obviously, to the context of the organization and the industry that they're in, that they obviously can also just tap into to kind of make sure that they're able to achieve that. But just given the complexity that is involved, given just how varied some of the activities are. I mean, Marzia touched on just all these activities that you need to coordinate in being able to achieve a certain objective or a milestone or a goal based on the promise that an organization has made in the market. I think we can all say that some organizations can definitely fare well in terms of just their progress towards achieving that. But I personally think there's still a lot of room for improvement in that regard.
Marzia, does the supply chain department get to say to the brand, do not pursue this campaign? This is not feasible. Or does the marketing department say, we're doing this, you make a plan?
I would like to say that that's what every supply chain professional dreams about, being able to stand up and say, do not proceed. However, and let me start by saying, and Thobekile, jump in here when you need to. Much of the tension between marketing and supply chain, I guess both teams are at fault.
Yep.
Supply chain typically, or used to, let's say, go, okay, this is going to take time, and we need to organize this. And so the messages going up to marketing is there's no speed, there's no reaction, there's no enthusiasm. Yeah. And it's just too slow. They can't support us fast enough. Marketing, on the other hand, has the sense, I think, to say, well, they'll never really understand. These are supply chain people. They really don't get us. We do such special stuff. They never understand. And the fact is that may be true. However, both sides have to figure out how to be able to talk to each other so they do understand each other and are able to move at the speed that the business needs. Yeah. So essentially, the idea or the best relationship is marketing, tell us what you need. Yeah. We'll tell you what's possible. We'll tell you what's going to cost so you can work out your profit margins. Okay. And we're also going to tell you where the risks are. Yeah. And then you, marketing, decide what we can do and what we can't do. To me, that's the best approach. The challenge is supply chain, make it happen. Make the magic happen, because marketing creates the magic. Supply chain is the value delivery channel that gets it from marketing's ideas to the consumer, to the actual consumer. So to me, the best situation is where those two collaborate. We've got this fantastic idea. Supply chain, what do you think? Supply chain says, wow, pull us in from the beginning. We're so excited about this. We want to walk the whole journey with you. Unfortunately, and Thobekile, you're absolutely right. The culture sometimes gets in the way, and that's because companies are still structured in silos. So you've got marketing, and then you've got procurement, and then you've got warehousing. And the reality is all supply chains start off with marketing and the idea, and then they work horizontally across the business. So they touch on each department, and the consumer is at the end of that. They don't, the movement isn't up and down, it's actually horizontal. And the businesses who don't get that, they still struggle with these silos, and information is either not conveyed between the silos, or is late, or isn't responded to adequately. And the feeling of we never get pulled in at the very beginning, and then we left to fix the thing at the end. That disjointed approach is what often happens, where the culture of the business doesn't see that actually the best way is to step aside and let the actual people who have to make this happen get on with it, rather than the senior people saying, oh, no, but you've got to get it. It's got to go all the way up, get approval, go across, get all the way down. And that is not responsive. And you said the key words, responsiveness and agility. That's what's needed.
I'm reminded of one of the speakers at the IMM Excellence Awards saying that supply chain or marketing overpromises and supply chain.
But Govan, let me share with you, and perhaps you will agree with this, Thobekile. let's look at 60-60. That has to be the perfect collaboration between the business saying, you know what, we need home delivery here. It's been done in South Africa before, and it's been done badly because 2 prior competitors tried it and failed. And Checkers said, we've got to get this right. And they happened to think about it in November 2019, which was just before COVID hit. So that was just happenstance. Okay. But how do we get this right? Marketing said, this is what we need.
Yeah.
Supply chain said, okay, if this is what you need, we're going to have to develop this. And we've got this problem, that problem. What do you think? And it developed, those ideas were sort of tossed around, so much so that RTT was pulled in to say, okay, we actually need that last mile service, which RTT didn't do, and Checkers certainly couldn't. Okay, we've got to have a platform that is fabulous.
Yes.
And okay, we've got to design that ourselves because there isn't anything out there. And so that collaboration resulted in what is, to the best of my knowledge, an 85% market share in the home delivery section. That's what 60-60 has achieved. And to me, that is the example of 2 teams that have different objectives, but can pull them together to get the business to succeed.
You know, Thobekile, we've been talking about the successes. But you guys keep saying that they're talking to each other, right? But for people who are in supply chain and others who are watching who are in marketing, what does that mean? What does that talking to each other mean? What are the best practices that are used to integrate the functions between supply chain and marketing? Is it a meeting? Is it an email? What is it? How do you do it?
Yeah. Govan, thank you so much for asking that question. And Marzia, I think, you've hit the nail on the head. What you're sharing certainly resonates. And, you know, I've just seen that dynamic play out over and over again in terms of what you've highlighted. But, you know, to your point, Govan, we want to make this practical. What does that actually look like? How do organizations bridge the gap? Because it's really actually not rocket scientists if you think about it, right? And there's definitely some tried and tested business practices that, you know, are used to help integrate marketing and supply chain more effectively. And I think for me, the hero framework that comes to mind is what we refer to as the sales and operation planning function. And look, I know that sounds like a very dry textbook thing, but stick with me because this is where the transformation happens. And it's really a combination of very basic things, Govan, that you've already touched on, like meetings, just communicating. So I like to refer to sales and operations planning as the operational handshake that takes place between marketing and supply chain, right? Marzia's already touched on in terms of you've got these different functions that obviously have different KPIs, different outcomes, different goals, right? But when these 2 teams come together within the sales and operations planning mindset, it then now starts to extend beyond what is referred to as just like a monthly meeting. And once again, the culture, the leadership, how that is set up also plays, a huge role in the success of how that is set up. But, you know, it then, if done very well, it becomes that strategic rhythm, right? Because what you're saying is you're having a structured conversation where marketing can say, hey, you know, here's what we're planning to push in the market. And they're saying this to the supply chain team. And the supply chain team can say, great, here's what that means for us from a production, from a warehousing, a distribution, and inventory perspective, right? So what that does is that instead of just like this reactive chaos, you're starting to bring teams together to engage more in proactive planning. So instead of pointing fingers around, oh no, you were supposed to do this, you went and promised the moon and the stars, and now we have to deliver as in yesterday, you're starting to build shared accountability. And I think for me, a best practice like sales and operations planning is where stories start to meet the required stock levels that are required to meet customer demand. Where campaigns are meeting the containers that obviously need to be imported or exported. When we support clients in implementing this, then I feel like there's quite a number of powerful steps or value that is added, because what it encourages is you starting to have cost functional forecast reviews where you've got two teams that are starting to actually co-create and say, how do we make this happen, right? Marketing starts to also make their campaign plans visible to the supply chain team. So they can also start advising to say, look, we think this is going to be feasible, or no, it's not going to be feasible, right?
Are
And the
there,
supply
sorry,
chain.
Thobekile, are there supply chain members in the marketing team?
So I think that would be just an absolutely amazing thing.
It seems like
That's
you
what we need
need at
to.
least one person there to uh, temper the expectation.
Exactly. I think, actually that's actually such an amazing question. So I think you can find people with a supply chain background that can be in the marketing team where they drive that sort of an awareness, right? But often you find that as Marzia also alluded to, it's always very distinct teams that are working against each other. But if you actually start to have that multidisciplinary skill set in terms of somebody with that supply chain background and knowledge that are contributing to how these marketing campaigns shape up, etc., you can just imagine the efficiency and the effectiveness, or just that awareness that is already brought in early into the process. So hence why I was saying to you when you asked in terms of, what does that look like? It's really as basic as teams coming together, communicating, creating that visibility, and having the conversation, right? To say, how early do we bring in people that are obviously impacted in terms of making this happen? At what point do we provide that visibility around what we're planning, and obviously bearing in mind the teams that have to effectively deliver upon those promises? So it starts to also shape the dynamic around how we achieve the KPIs, how we even understand the language that is being used by the two separate teams, right? Because it's like I earlier said, you've got this different dialect, this jargon that we as supply chain would like to use that the marketing team sometimes just absolutely doesn't understand. But if you now break it down in terms of what does this practically mean from a supply chain and logistics perspective? Yes, we hear you've got all these amazing ideas, but if we now practically break it down and then also start to bring just overall business objectives, what does that look like? And I think having those earlier conversations really is what actually drives that synergy and helps effectively deliver some of those objectives that the organization will obviously, set up from the get-go. So yeah, I think it really boils down to that communication, that cross-functional, visibility across the teams, and just having the communication, just sitting down and saying, how do we make it work together as a team?
Marzia, you've shared a few examples, but are we getting it right? You guys are not answering me. Hey? What is your opinion right now in the South African context?
Some company. Well, South Africa is a difficult test case because you need excitement in the economy, and unfortunately, we've got challenges in the economy. The world has challenges with a lot of the recent movements in global trade, but for lots of new things to be happening in marketing, you need a lot of dynamism in the economy. And I don't see that there's a lot of that happening now. That doesn't mean to say that we aren't innovating, because I think we are. I think we do some exceptional stuff in South Africa. And I found that companies that are, let me call them younger, are more able, in other words, they've been around for 50 years, rather than 200 years, are more able to adjust to the fact that you need cross-functional teams. They don't have to be permanent teams. You can set them up if there's a project, a new product launch, a promotion. But so you've got your business as usual stuff, and those are regular meetings, and you determine, okay, marketing, what's the service level you want to achieve for the consumers? Okay, we need this level of service because 100% is not possible. It's just too expensive for any business. Okay, so this is an acceptable level, and you set your activities in the supply chain to match the expectation in marketing. And that's everyday business as usual stuff. And then you have events, a campaign, a seasonal thing, whatever. And then you need a special team, cross-functional team, that has all the players that make a difference. And that's where you have to have common KPIs. And the objective is for this team to achieve, never mind the marketing objective, but the business objective. We've got to grow market share, or if we've got to increase revenue, the team is responsible. So it's not just marketing that's got to make it. Supply chain's got to actually make it too, because they would fail if marketing fails. So those cross-functional teams, and interestingly enough, and I haven't been in the field, but perhaps, Thobekile, you've seen it. There's a move now to have, although they are called up ad hoc, but they are almost a permanent structure that's pulled in when it's needed, depending on the challenge to the business, whether the challenge is, for example, South Africa's now going to have, or the AGOA disappears, that agreement disappears, or South Africa now has to deal with 25% import duties on all the citrus and the agricultural products that South Africa exports a lot of agricultural stuff to the US. So that says, okay, let's pull a team together because we've got to do something different. We may have to find a new market. We may have to market differently to that new market, or we may have to do something different about costs so that there is no direct impact on consumers in America, so we can still retain that market share. And so that team gets pulled together to say, we've got a business problem here, but it can't be solved by the CEO. It's got to be marketing and supply chain that works out how we're going to overcome this obstacle. And it's always, definitely in supply chain, there's always something new that needs to be addressed. It may be the blockage in the Suez Canal, but it could be what's happening, in the Red Sea and all those disruptions in the Red Sea. It could be extreme weather events. So there's always something that says there's a risk to the business. We've got to pull these ad hoc teams and say, what are we going to do? Because we can't just wait for it to happen. We've got to act preemptively.
I know that South Africa the South African economy is going through its own issues, but the rest of the continent is alive with possibility. And the IMM Institute also allied to the African Marketing Confederation. And I know that a number of people watching do business across the continent. But I'm interested to know what your opinion is, Thobekile, of the capacity of supply chain in South Africa, how it compares to say, other countries that are more developed, and whether the African continent has that same capacity. Like, do we struggle to source goods in other African countries, or is it a little bit easier? And is there more opportunity for synergy there?
I think that also varies, Governor. I think the logistics infrastructure, is always key in making something like that possible. And if you just look at the African continent, it definitely does vary. If we look at South Africa, for example, and compare ourselves to other African countries, we've definitely got a much better road infrastructure that is obviously critical to a function like logistics. If I consider just, having spent quite a good chunk of my career in the 3PL space, I think I can definitely tell you firsthand that this partnership that we're talking about now in terms of marketing and supply chain is not only critical in consumer-facing industries, but also critical in logistics too, right? And I think there's definitely opportunities for even synergies to take place amongst the continents. But to make that happen, you obviously need a very good infrastructure. You need to have a very good strategy around, the utilization of capacity. You need to have a very good strategy around how do you actually meet the demand in terms of the volumes, but also have the right teams that understand the country context, because like I said, it differs, right? What might work in South Africa as a best practice might not necessarily work as a best practice in Nigeria or Zimbabwe. So there's a lot of nuances that you obviously need to take into consideration that, build up to a solution that you would say is effective in terms of meeting a particular market. But I think in terms of just that collaboration, in terms of achieving those synergies, it is possible. But I think where we're still experiencing quite a lot of challenges is in terms of the logistics infrastructure that obviously varies. I think as South Africa, we've also got our fair challenges when we think about our ports, our rail infrastructure, etc. But I think in terms of maturity, there are some good wins that we can obviously highlight, but definitely quite a number of synergies that we can definitely exploit in that regard.
I think that a supply chain official or practitioner would be best placed to recognize opportunities in the African Continental Free Trade Agreement or area. And they could probably help marketing teams target specific areas where new campaigns could be launched. I don't understand why they're not part of the marketing team. Is that a controversial thing to say? To bring a supply chain member into your marketing team?
Well, some companies do, simply because it's a cost issue. Marketing sets the selling price that suits the business, but your margin is determined by what it costs you to get that product to market. And getting that product to market, and those costs are generally mostly in the supply chain. So from just that perspective, there is a supply chain representative in the marketing team. But I think in Southern or in Africa, the biggest challenge, as Thobekile says, is one of infrastructure, because the costs are exorbitant. So there could be a lot more trade if it was cheaper to do trade. So, all sorts of risks. Stuff gets lost. There are long delays. I'll give you an example. From all exports that used to go to Durban from Mpumalanga and Limpopo, most of that business is actually going through into Maputo port now, because that's more efficient than Durban is. There are fewer delays. That's caused an entirely different problem, because now they've got to be transported by road all the way, because the rail infrastructure is not. So, road is expensive and there are greater risks. The rail infrastructure that was available some years ago is no longer available. So taking stuff up by rail to anywhere in Africa isn't possible any longer. And it means you've got to take it by road with all the risks and all the costs that are associated. So I think the obstacle there is just the cost of that service across Africa, which has been by and large addressed in, for example, continental America and in continental Europe, because they've figured out how to make it more cost effective and eliminate some of the delays that happen at borders. There's still an awful lot of delays at our borders. Sometimes it's just capacity. There just aren't enough people to be able to move the volume of trade through. But to me, the value and all the potential to do business in Africa is not being capitalized, is not being taken up, that opportunity is not being taken up, simply because the cost of doing business is so high relative to what you can sell your product for in those markets.
Okay, I have a question for both of you. As we almost concluding. You know, a lot of marketers watch this Friday Flash Talk, and so do a lot of supply chain representatives. What do you have to say, Thobekile, I'll start with you. What do you have to say to a member of a supply chain team that has a tense relationship right now with the marketing? Or say bad.
Yeah.
Let's say, he's working in a company and there's a bad relationship between the two teams.
Yeah.
They're listening to this talk and thinking these are great ideas, but you know what? Right now, it's not the vibe.
Yeah, Govan, what you've highlighted is definitely a lived experience. I think I did highlight that I've spent a good chunk of my career in the 3PL space, and if I just draw from that to answer you, back in my third-party logistics days, I used to get very frustrated with the sales and business development team. And here was my frustration. They'd go out into the world, pitch to clients that, we can deliver unicorns and rainbows and just give them a whole, buffet of bold promises. And then what happens is they come to the logistics and solutions team and they just toss it over to you. And it's like, yeah, go make it happen as in yesterday. And you're sitting there thinking, cool, when exactly were you planning to loop me into the conversations? But what we did find is that, I never used to be quiet. I used to actually share those frustrations. And what slowly started to happen is that in rare instances where we would be involved early in kind of like the pre-sales conversation, the dynamic started to change, right? So I could say suddenly we were no longer just executors, but we were actually now starting to be viewed as partners, or like I highlighted earlier, co-creators in actually designing the solution. So what is that warehousing solution going to look like? Or what does that integrated logistics solution look like, right? So the solutions that we came up with started to be a lot more smarter and cost effective. And I think more especially more realistic, right? And I want to emphasize the word realistic to implement. And I think that's the magic of early integration. So it's really getting that message across to say, look, we're not saying don't do what you need to do. But when sales and marketing and supply chain and logistics talk to each other before commitments are made, you don't just get cooperation, you get collaboration, as we've already kind of highlighted. And I think that's what unlocks the real value. I think it takes time to drive that message. I'll be very honest, it didn't just happen overnight. Like I say, as we were sharing those frustrations, when things actually didn't go well, and the solution maybe was not effective or efficient, and we lost money, that's where we had to draw the lessons and say, how can we do things better? So I think if you think of some of the wins, just, like you said, what's the key message? I think some of the best ways to get that buy-in is for people just to see some of the wins that can be achieved by adopting some of those best practices in terms of just that collaboration. And I think for us, it was better planning. It was better capacity. Capacity is a huge thing in logistics. The ability to utilize your capacity is huge. The ability to minimize those panic and emergency shipments is massive, right? And just also having that stronger supplier engagement where also your upstream and downstream suppliers are also involved. And you're actually involving all the stakeholders that are involved in actually delivering on that solution. Things like being able to actually plan better, route planning and distribution routes being a lot more optimized and reducing waste. And I think all of this really did lead to not only better customer experience, but for us as a team, we started to work better with each other. And I think there were fewer internal headaches. They were still there, but if you just focus on what at the end of the day the organization is concerned with, it's to make money, and it started to actually drive stronger commercial results. So yeah, I think my the key message I'd say it's important. It's important to drive those conversations because it doesn't just end up sounding like a feel-good story, but you've got just tangible evidence around if we start to work in this manner, this is what we can achieve. And that in itself becomes a competitive advantage.
And I suppose that's how you sustain the synergy
Yes,
at the end of the
absolutely. And I
day.
think, sorry, go for it.
No, that was it. Marzia, there's still some people watching who they're kind of like cringing when they before they go to that meeting because they know they're going to go deliver bad news, or they're really worried about what's going to be presented now because they fear that the other team doesn't understand.
Yeah, that happens. It happens even in the best of situations. But let me just speak to the question that you just and that Thobekile so eloquently answered. Think of left and right brain people. So marketing people are right brain people. Typically, supply chain management people are left brain people. What you need supply chain people to be is to think and speak like marketing people, to show that enthusiasm, to be willing to actually move to the dark side. The dread for marketing people is to hear this. No, we can't.
Yeah.
What marketing people have to do is say, yes, we can, but this is what we're going to need.
Yes.
Okay, not no. And if you go in with that mindset as a supply chain person, you're much more likely to actually be drawn closer to the marketing team and be seen as they're part of us. They're not actually there an obstacle that we have to overcome because they're always standing in our way. And then to go back to your question, the idea, I think supply chain people have to stop seeing things as a problem, and because actually what they should believe is anything is possible. The only issue is how much it costs.
Yeah.
So we can do anything you need us to do, but here's what's going to cost. And then it's not a decision about should we do it, shouldn't it? Can we afford to? And then even marketing can look at it and go, you know what, that's actually going to be too expensive. Yeah. I've seen these conversations play out where, we want this fabulous packaging. Yeah. Sure, you can have it. Absolutely, you can have it. You can even have it more sophisticated, but this is what's going to cost you. Yeah. And if you factor that into the costing for your product, you can see that actually your margin shrinks. Yes. And suddenly the conversation with marketing changes because they're realists. Yes, they are, they're blue sky people. They create wonderful ideas. They innovate, and they've got to think wild and woolly things because actually is exactly what the business needs. But they're also realists. And when you show them the impact of what they want to do, they come down to it and go, okay, how can we do it better? How can we do it different? They will listen to suggestions from supply chain. So nobody from the supply chain go thinking, oh my word, it's going to be awful, because that already sets them up. Okay? Yeah. We're going to resist because we think it's terrible, and they're going to keep saying, yes, but it's your fault because you need to. So the idea, let's go in there and find solutions together rather than go, oh, this is really going to be good. Okay. This is the reality. If you throw enough money at anything, you can fix it. But can the company afford to throw that kind of money?
Yeah.
There's some amazing insights so far. I think, I think that a lot of this just requires a bit of humility.
Yeah.
What I'm getting from
Absolutely.
the thing. Marketing is about bravado. I'm really glad that there are a lot of marketers who watch the IMM Friday Flash Talk. And I'm really glad that we had this conversation. Before we go, I'd like you all to just, both of you, just to give me the top things that you think people watching this should remember. Top two things that you believe are the takeaways from this conversation that people could take into the next meeting and hopefully build upon when they share the link to this conversation with all of their colleagues. Thobekile.
Yeah, so I think for me, parting shot is, functional silos are inconvenient. They're annoying and they're expensive, to be quite honest. And they really make us lose quite a lot of opportunities. But I think integration needs to be intentional, and it is possible. So when marketing and supply chain collaborate, we're not just hitting targets where we start to exceed them, right? But what I actually also do still want to emphasize is that leadership is key, culture is key, because I think that's what also makes, you know, the glue stick. So we need to move away from a mindset of chaos to coordination, from firefighting to better planning and forecasting, from being reactive to more strategic, right? And I think that's when we can fully exploit the benefits and the value that come from integrating, I believe, two powerful functions like marketing and supply chain, which are critical to any organization. So I'm really hoping the thoughts and perspectives we've shared will definitely inspire a few operational handshakes, if I can refer to it that way, because definitely I think we've seen that when we do fuse marketing and supply chain, we start to unlock a whole new level of synergy.
Thank you, Thobekile. And Marzia, your final words.
The first message I'd like to convey is there is no problem that a solution cannot be found.
Yeah.
So every problem has a solution. Remember that. Anyone, marketing, supply chain, remember that. And secondly, marketing people can be analytical too, and supply chain people can be creative. And with that capacity in both teams, anything is possible.
Yeah.
It's been a real pleasure talking to both of you, and it certainly opened my mind up to more collaboration and probably informed more of the marketing conversations that we'll have in the future. I know that we'll have a lot more conversations about supply chain management and collaboration between these two important parts of a successful brand. I'd just like to say thank you to Marzia Storpioli, the IMM Graduate School specialist who is joining us today, and Thobekile Nxumalo, our guest speaker, a seasoned supply chain professional. It's been a great conversation. I found it enlightening. We hope that you have too. And we hope that you'll continue the conversation online. Remember to share it. Let's hear your comments. We do check the LinkedIn page quite often, and I'll be sure to share a couple of posts as well. But until next time, this has been the IMM Friday Flash Talk. We look forward to seeing you again. For myself, Govan Whittles, thank you and goodbye.